Picture a forge in Pittsburgh, 1902. The air shimmers with heat from molten steel. The floor trembles with each strike of machinery. Above a group of men, a block of iron hangs suspended, 40 tons of cast steel held by a single steam piston. The men below are forging a ship propeller shaft. They have 4 seconds to position the glowing metal on the anvil. They have 3 seconds to pull their hands back. They have been doing this for 6 hours. One man miscalculates by half a second. The hammer drops. When the steam clears, his hands are gone. This is not a story about one hammer. This is a story about the most dangerous timing game in industrial history. The machine that demanded perfect reflexes from exhausted men. The monster that crushed anything too slow to escape. Before hydraulics refined metalworking, heavy forgings required massive force delivered by steam-powered drop hammers. These machines were not subtle. A typical steam hammer stood 3 stories tall. The hammerhead alone weighed between 20 and 50 tons. Beneath it sat an anvil weighing even more, sometimes 100 tons, embedded directly into the earth to absorb the impact. Steam pressure raised the hammer. It fell by gravity, sometimes with additional steam pressure driving it downward. When it struck, the force was measured in thousands of tons per square inch. This force could reshape a 10-ton steel ingot in a single blow. It could also crush a human body into pulp in a fraction of a second. The operation was deceptively simple. A team of workers positioned a piece of red-hot steel on the anvil using long tongs. The hammer operator pulled a lever. Steam filled the cylinder above the hammerhead. The head rose smoothly upward. When the operator released the lever, the hammer dropped. The entire cycle took between 6 and 12 seconds, depending on the size of the hammer. Large forgings required dozens of strikes. Each strike required the workers to reposition the hot metal. Each repositioning required them to place their hands, their tongs, and their bodies directly beneath 40 tons of falling iron. They did this hundreds of times per day. The hammer did not care about timing. The hammer did not wait. The hammer simply dropped when the lever moved. The danger was not the hammer itself. The danger was human error compounded by physics. A worker operating a hammer for 8 hours became fatigued. Fatigue slowed reaction time. Reaction time determined survival. In 1905, studies by factory safety inspectors measured the average human reaction time at 0.6 seconds. This was the time between seeing danger and beginning to move. The time to actually move your hand clear of the anvil added another 0.4 seconds. Total time needed to escape, 1 full second. The problem was that steam hammers did not give you a full second. Once the operator released the lever, the hammer began falling immediately. A 40-ton hammer dropped 16 feet in 0.9 seconds. Smaller hammers dropped faster. The math was simple and brutal. If you were still touching the metal when the hammer began its descent, you were not getting your hands back. The accidents followed patterns. The most common injury was crushed fingers. A worker would be repositioning hot metal with tongs. The tongs would slip. The worker would instinctively reach out to steady the metal with his hand. The hammer operator, watching the metal and not the worker, would release the hammer. The fingers would be flattened before the worker could scream. The next most common injury was crushed hands. This happened when workers misjudged the timing and pulled back too slowly. The hammer caught the hand between the workpiece and the anvil. The hand did not break. It compressed. Bones turned to powder. Tissue turned to paste. Surgeons could do nothing. Amputation was the only option. The worst injuries involved full arms or bodies. These occurred when a worker slipped on the oil-covered floor while leaning over the anvil. The hammer operator could not stop mid-stroke. There was no emergency brake. Once released, the hammer fell until it hit something. Sometimes that something was a human torso. The horror of hammer deaths was the sound. Factory workers described it as a wet crunch followed by absolute silence. The hammer struck. the body compressed, the steam exhausted, then nothing. The other workers would stand frozen because there was nothing to do. The hammer had already done its work. The body beneath it was no longer recognizable as human. In 1908, a hammer operator in Philadelphia killed his own brother this way. The brother had leaned too far over the anvil to adjust the angle of a gun barrel they were forging. The operator released the hammer on schedule. He did not see his brother move into the danger zone. The hammer dropped, 42 tons of iron moving at 20 feet per second. The impact drove the body 6 inches into the anvil. The operator did not work again. He hung himself 3 weeks later. Factory owners knew the hammers were killing workers. The accident reports were consistent and detailed. In 1910, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reviewed hammer accidents at heavy forging facilities across 12 states. They found that steam hammers were responsible for 417 deaths over a 5-year period. Those figures did not include injuries or partial amputations. They counted complete fatalities only. The death rate was 8 workers per 100 hammers per year. The injury rate was 40 workers per 100 hammers per year. These numbers were considered acceptable. The hammers were essential. Navy shipyards needed them for propeller shafts. Railroads needed them for locomotive frames. Steel mills needed them for heavy plate. There were no alternatives. You could not forge a 20-ton steel shaft without a steam hammer. The work had to be done. The workers had to accept the risk. Some forges tried to implement safety measures. The most common was a warning bell that rang 3 seconds before the hammer dropped. It failed immediately. The bell rang hundreds of times per day, and workers stopped hearing it. The sound faded into background noise, like the hiss of steam or the roar of furnaces. When the bell actually mattered, when someone was in danger, nobody reacted. Other forges tried painted floor markers showing the danger zone around the anvil. That failed too. The danger zone was wherever the work was. You could not forge steel from outside the painted lines. You had to be close. You had to lean in. You had to place your hands near the impact point. The painted lines meant nothing. A few advanced facilities experimented with 2 operator systems. One operator controlled the hammer, and a second operator watched the workers and had veto power to prevent the drop. This reduced accidents by 30%. It also reduced productivity by 30%. The forges abandoned the system after 6 months. Productivity mattered more than hands. The workers developed their own survival strategies. Experienced hammer crews used a counting system. The lead worker counted aloud. 1 meant positioning the metal. 2 meant adjusting the angle. 3 meant clearing the area. The hammer operator dropped on 4. This worked until someone miscounted, or the noise drowned out the voice, or fatigue made someone slow. Another strategy was the tap system. A worker tapped the anvil twice with the tongs to signal ready. The hammer operator waited for the tap. This worked until the tap was unclear, or the operator was watching something else, or steam obscured the view. Every safety system relied on perfect communication between exhausted men in a deafening environment filled with smoke and steam. Perfect communication did not exist. The hammers kept killing. The physics of the hammer made escape impossible in certain scenarios. If you were holding tongs pinned under the workpiece when the hammer dropped, you had 2 choices. Release the tongs and save your hands. Hold the tongs and lose your hands. Most workers held on. This was instinct. You did not drop your tools. You did not abandon your work. The tongs cost money. The foreman would be angry. These thoughts flickered in the fraction of a second before the hammer crushed your fingers into the anvil. Some workers survived by releasing the tongs. They watched $40 tongs flatten into scrap. They kept their hands. They also often lost their jobs for destroying company property. The economic calculation was clear. Tongs were expensive. Workers were free. There were always more workers. The worst aspect of hammer work was that experience did not protect you. Beginners were cautious. They moved slowly. They stayed clear of the danger zone. They survived. Workers with 5 or 10 years of experience became confident. They knew the timing. They could position metal faster. They could work closer to the hammer. They took risks that beginners would not take. Then one day their timing was off by 1/4 of a second. The hammer took their hand. Factory accident records from the 1910s show that the majority of hammer injuries occurred to workers with more than 3 years of experience. Familiarity did not breed safety. Familiarity bred contempt for the danger. The hammer did not care about your experience. The hammer cared about physics. Some workers quit after seeing their first hammer death. Most stayed. The pay was good. Hammer operators earned $18 per week in 1910. That was 50% more than general factory labor. The danger premium was real. The work attracted men who needed money more than they feared death. It also attracted men who believed they were too skilled to make mistakes. These men died at the same rate as everyone else. The hammer did not respect skill. A master forger with 20 years of experience had the same reaction time as a novice. 0.6 seconds to recognize danger. 0.4 seconds to move. 1 second total. The hammer fell in 0.9 seconds. The math did not change based on experience. The hammer era did not end because of safety concerns. It ended because of technology. Hydraulic presses became practical in the 1920s. These machines could apply the same force as drop hammers, but with precise control. The operator could stop a hydraulic press mid-stroke. The descent speed was adjustable, and the pressure was programmable. Hydraulic presses were safer, more efficient, and more precise. Forges converted to hydraulics because they produced better work, not because they killed fewer workers. By 1940, most American heavy forges had replaced their steam hammers. The great hammers were scrapped for metal. The anvils were buried or repurposed. The workers who had spent decades timing their lives to falling iron simply moved on to other dangers. The factories found new ways to kill people. The total death toll from steam drop hammers is difficult to calculate. Records are incomplete. Many deaths were attributed to other causes. A crushed chest might be listed as heart failure. A mangled arm might be listed as blood loss rather than hammer injury. But conservative estimates from labor historians suggest that between 1880 and 1930, steam hammers killed at least 2,000 workers in American industry. That is 1 death every 9 days for 50 years. Most were men between 20 and 40 years old. Most left families with no compensation beyond a month's wages. Most were forgotten within a year. For 50 years, the drop hammer was the timing game that thousands of workers played every day. You positioned the metal, you pulled your hands back, you hoped your reflexes were faster than 40 tons of gravity. Sometimes they were not. The hammer did not apologize. The hammer did not slow down. The hammer simply dropped, and when it dropped, you had 3 seconds to survive.